President Biden signed 3 executive orders Tuesday advancing his immigration reform agenda. The proposals aim to overhaul many of the policies established by former President Trump. The Biden administration also introduced a new bill that would help create a clear path to citizenship. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Hi there, Camilo. So the first executive order establishes a task force to identify all migrant children who are separated from their families by the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy. It will be headed by newly confirmed Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. How will the task force begin this identification process, and is there a timeline for how long it could take?
Hi, Elaine. It's good to be with you again. So this order by President Biden that created this task force will order this group of government officials to, one, locate all the migrant children who were separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy in 2017 and 2018, and also look for ways to reunite them with their parents or legal guardians if that is necessary in certain circumstances, rather. Another mandate that this task force has is to look at whether any of these children and parents are eligible for immigration benefits like visas or humanitarian parole to come back here to the U.S. and to facilitate their reunification. And so this is a very concrete but also symbolic gesture that the new Biden administration is making on immigration to dismantle this legacy of the Trump administration's widely criticized family separation policy. And for context for our viewers, Elaine, it's important to note that more than 3,000 families were separated during the height of zero tolerance in 2018, but an additional 1,000 families were separated before that policy was implemented across the entire border. And advocates have yet to locate the parents of more than 600 children who were separated during this time period. So hopefully, it is their hope, that this task force will help them find these parents.
600 children. Camilo, how does the Biden administration plan on preventing the separation of migrant families going forward?
Well, the Biden administration has reiterated on multiple occasions that it will not implement a policy at the border to prosecute parents for illegal entry and to send their children off to shelters overseen by the U.S. government. That is exactly what the Trump administration did. The Biden administration has said that it will look for ways to ensure that Central American families have some economic opportunity in their home countries, and that issues like violence and crime are reduced so they don't feel like they need to undertake this dangerous journey to the U.S.-Mexico border with their families and small children. So that is a completely different approach than the one taken by the Trump administration, which was really, Elaine, focused on deterring migrants from coming here.
And Camilo, the second executive order mandates a review of former President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. It required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their hearings in the U.S. What different border policies can we expect from the new administration?
Yes, so the new Biden administration has already suspended new enrollments in the so-called Remain in Mexico policy, which required more than 70,000 non-Mexican asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their U.S. immigration cases were adjudicated. So that policy has been effectively suspended, but there are still thousands of asylum seekers, Elaine, waiting in northern Mexico with pending U.S. cases, and it is still unclear what will happen to their cases, because we don't know if the Biden administration will allow these asylum seekers to continue their immigration proceedings here in the U.S. One of today's orders also mandates that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention review an order that has allowed border officials to expel migrants and asylum seekers during the pandemic under the premise that the coronavirus could spread if more migrants are allowed into the country and inside migrant holding facilities. So that policy will be reviewed because that was a very sweeping policy, Elaine. The Trump administration invoked a late 19th century law to say that it would not allow any asylum seeker to stay here in the U.S., to make a case for asylum, to have an interview, but rather those asylum seekers would be expelled to Mexico or to their home country. So this is a pretty big shift.
Camilo, explain to us this so-called public charge rule, because I think people may not fully understand. First of all, tell us what this public charge rule is, and then what is it that immigration advocates say the effect of this public charge rule has been?
Sure. So the public charge rule is one of the legal immigration restrictions that the Trump administration implemented during its 4 years in office, and it is one of the policies that President Biden has now ordered his administration to review. It allowed essentially immigration officials to have more power to deny applications from green cards, and for visas from applicants who the government determined could rely on government benefits like housing vouchers and food stamps in the future. And so many advocates have been scathing in their criticism of this rule because they say it created an effective wealth test for green cards, and that it scared many immigrant families from accessing critical programs like food stamps for children. And so many advocates are concerned, and they want Mr. Biden to quickly dismantle this policy, but this was implemented through the rulemaking process, so it might take some time before the policy is effectively ended.
Finally, Camilo, beyond these actual orders, what is it that we can expect to see with respect to immigration from the Biden administration here as we move into the next weeks and months ahead?
Well, that's a great question, because none of these orders, Elaine, touch on the sweeping limits that Mr. Trump made to legal immigration on economic grounds last year. Mr. Trump said that because of the economic recession caused by the coronavirus pandemic, the U.S. could not admit new foreign workers and new immigrants while the coronavirus was still a major public health crisis here in the U.S. So that limited immigrant visas and also temporary work programs like the H-1B visa program. Those visas have not been issued since April and June of last year. Mr. Biden's officials have indicated that they oppose this policy and that they will rescind it eventually, but it is still unclear when it will actually move forward with ending this policy. So that's something that we still need to see. Another policy is at the U.S.-Mexico border, officials are still, as we said, expelling migrants and asylum seekers under the CDC order. And there is a fear among some advocates that this policy will continue indefinitely because of the pandemic. So it's still important for us to keep tabs on how these policies continue to change in the coming weeks.
All right, Camilo Montoya-Galvez for us. Camilo, thank you.